Victoria Hayes grabbed the microphone and pointed straight at the rusted Mustang in the back of the parking lot. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the future of transportation." The executives roared with laughter. Camera phones flashed. The janitor stood frozen beside his car, mop still in hand. But then Marcus Chen did something no one expected. He walked to his car, opened the door, and turned the key. The engine didn't sputter. It didn't cough. It roared a sound so pure, so powerful that every laugh died in every throat. What Victoria didn't know was that inside that rusted shell sat a $2 billion secret. A secret that would destroy her empire and reveal the darkest sin of her own family. Drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. The laughter started at exactly 4:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Marcus Chen heard it before he saw it. That sharp, cruel sound that cuts through a man's chest like broken glass. He was pushing his mop bucket across the lobby floor of Hayes Aerospace Technologies when the first wave hit him. "Oh my God, is that thing even street legal?" He didn't need to look up to know what they were laughing at. He already knew. His car. His 1972 Ford Mustang. The one with the rust spreading across the hood like a disease. The one with the passenger door that didn't close right. The one that looked like it belonged in a junkyard, not in the parking lot of a $4 billion aerospace company. Marcus kept mopping. He'd learned a long time ago that the best way to survive was to stay invisible. Keep your head down, do your job, don't give them anything to remember. But today, they weren't going to let him disappear. "Marcus, hey Marcus." The voice belonged to Brad Thornton, Vice President of Operations. 42 years old, Harvard MBA, drove a Tesla Model S that cost more than Marcus made in 3 years. Brad was the kind of man who measured his worth by the size of his office and the fear in other people's eyes. Marcus stopped mopping. "Yes, sir." "Come outside for a second. Victoria wants to see something." Victoria. Victoria Hayes. The CEO. The woman who owned everything, the building, the company, the patents, the future. The woman who had never once looked Marcus in the eye in the 4 years he'd worked here. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I need to finish this floor, sir." "The floor can wait." Brad's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This is important." Marcus leaned his mop against the wall and followed Brad through the glass doors into the afternoon sun. The parking lot was crowded. At least 50 employees had gathered in a loose semicircle, and at the center of it all stood Victoria Hayes. She was 43 years old and looked 35. Blonde hair pulled back tight. Designer suit that probably cost more than a semester at Stanford. She held a wireless microphone in one hand and a champagne flute in the other. "Ah, there he is." Victoria's voice carried across the lot, amplified by the speaker system someone had set up. "Our guest of honor." Marcus stopped walking. Every eye in the crowd turned toward him. "Come on, don't be shy." Victoria gestured him forward. "We're doing our quarterly innovation showcase. You know the drill, everyone shows off their new rides, talks about the future of transportation. And I thought, why not include everyone? Even our support staff." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Marcus didn't move. "That is your car, isn't it?" Victoria pointed at the Mustang parked in the far corner of the lot. "The, vintage model?" More laughter, louder this time. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. 4 years. 4 years of mopping floors and emptying trash cans and cleaning toilets that executives couldn't be bothered to flush. 4 years of being invisible. And now this woman who had never learned his name, who walked past him every day like he was a piece of furniture, was putting him on display like a circus animal. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "That's my car." "Wonderful." Victoria clapped her hands together. "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the future of aerospace, apparently." She swept her arm toward the Mustang. "I mean, if this thing can still move, surely we can get a rocket to Mars, right?" The crowd exploded. People were doubling over, wiping tears from their eyes. Someone shouted, "Does it run on hopes and prayers?" Marcus stood very still. He thought about Elena. He thought about the night she died, holding his hand in that hospital room, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't let them bury it, Marcus. Don't let them win." He thought about the engine hidden beneath that rusted hood. The engine she'd helped him build. The engine that could change everything. And something shifted inside him. "You want to see if it runs?" Marcus asked. The laughter stuttered. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, you want to see if my car runs?" Marcus started walking toward the Mustang. "I'll show you." The crowd parted. Marcus could feel their eyes on his back, could hear the whispers starting up. What's he doing? Is he serious? This should be good. He reached the Mustang and put his hand on the door handle. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun. Familiar. Comforting. "Marcus?" Brad's voice carried a warning. "Maybe you should just—" Marcus opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like old leather and motor oil, and something else. Something that only Marcus could identify. Elena's perfume. Faint now, almost gone, but still there. Still with him. He put his hands on the steering wheel and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried to stay invisible, but they won't let me." Then he turned the key. The engine didn't sputter. It didn't cough. It didn't wheeze or groan or make any of the sounds you'd expect from a 50-year-old car with rust on its hood. Instead, it sang. A deep, smooth, powerful harmonic that rolled across the parking lot like thunder. The sound was unlike anything the crowd had ever heard, not from a car, not from a plane, not from any machine ever built. It was pure, perfect, alive. The laughter stopped. Every single person in that parking lot went silent. Marcus revved the engine once, twice, 3 times. Each time that impossible sound filled the air, vibrating in their chests, making their teeth hum. Victoria's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the asphalt. Marcus killed the engine, stepped out of the car, and walked back toward the building without looking at anyone. "Wait." Victoria's voice had lost its mockery. "Wait, what was that? What kind of engine?" But Marcus was already gone. Disappearing through the glass doors, returning to his mop and his bucket, and his invisibility. Behind him, the crowd stood frozen, staring at the rusted Mustang like they'd just witnessed a miracle. Because they had. They just didn't know it yet. Victoria couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her penthouse bedroom, 37 floors above San Francisco, staring at the ceiling and listening to that sound replay in her mind. That engine. That impossible engine. She'd been around cars her whole life. Her father had built Hayes Aerospace from a small auto parts manufacturer into a global aerospace giant. She'd grown up in garages and factories, surrounded by the smell of gasoline and the roar of combustion engines. She knew what machines sounded like, and that sound, that smooth, perfect, almost musical sound, was not something any machine should be able to make. She reached for her phone and dialed. "Brad, I need you in my office tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. "Victoria, it's 2 a.m. "I need everything you can find on Marcus Chen. Employment history, background check. I want to know where he came from, where he worked before, what he did before he started pushing a mop around my building." Silence on the other end. "Brad, that janitor. You want me to investigate the janitor. Did you hear that engine today?" "I mean, yeah, it was different, I guess. Old car probably has some custom work." "Different." Victoria sat up in bed. "Brad, I've heard engines from Ferrari, from Lamborghini, from military jets that can break the sound barrier. I've never heard anything like that. Not once. Not ever." She could hear Brad breathing on the other end of the line. 6 a.m., she repeated. "Don't be late." She hung up and lay back down. but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus Chen's face as he walked back into the building. No triumph, no satisfaction, no revenge, just sadness, like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Brad was waiting in her office at 5:45. "You look terrible," Victoria said, pouring herself a coffee. "Thanks. So do you." Brad dropped a thin folder on her desk. "That's everything I could find, which isn't much." Victoria picked up the folder and started reading. Marcus Chen, 52 years old, born in Oakland, bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from MIT, master's from Stanford. She stopped reading. Wait, MIT Stanford. It gets better. Brad leaned back in his chair. After Stanford, he spent 12 years at NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, worked on propulsion systems for deep space missions, published papers, won awards. The guy was a rising star. Victoria felt something cold creep up her spine. Then what the hell is he doing mopping my floors? That's where it gets weird. Brad pointed at the folder. About 15 years ago, he just disappears, leaves NASA, drops off the grid completely. No publications, no patents, no employment records, nothing. Then 4 years ago, he shows up here, applies for a janitor position with a fake resume that lists him as a high school dropout with no work experience. A fake resume. Whoever did his background check didn't dig very deep. Or maybe they just didn't care. I mean, who investigates janitors? Victoria stared at the folder, her mind racing. A NASA engineer, a propulsion specialist, hiding in her building for 4 years mopping floors and emptying trash. Why, there's one more thing, Brad said quietly. I found an old news article from 15 years ago, right before Chen disappeared from NASA. He handed her a printout. The headline read, "Aerospace Engineer's Wife Loses Battle with Cancer." Below it, a photograph of Marcus Chen, younger, thinner, his eyes hollow with grief, standing beside a woman in a hospital bed. The woman was smiling despite the tubes in her arms, despite the shadows under her eyes. Her name was Elena Chen. She was also an engineer. She died at 41 years old. They were working on something together, Brad said. Some kind of advanced propulsion system. The article mentions it briefly, calls it a revolutionary energy recycling engine. But there's no other information. No patents filed. No follow-up research. It's like the whole project just vanished. Victoria read the article 3 times. Revolutionary energy recycling engine. She thought about the sound in the parking lot. That smooth, impossible sound. I want surveillance footage, she said finally. Every camera in the parking lot. I want to see what he does with that car when no one's watching. Victoria, that's a bit... Do it. Brad hesitated, then nodded. I'll have it by end of day. The footage arrived at 6 p.m. Victoria locked her office door and watched alone. The first video showed Marcus arriving at work at 5:30 a.m., parking the Mustang in the far corner of the lot, the same spot every day. Nothing unusual. The second video showed him leaving at 11 p.m., 3 hours after his shift ended. He didn't go straight to his car. Instead, he walked to the trunk, opened it, and pulled out a small toolbox. Victoria leaned closer to the screen. Marcus popped the hood of the Mustang and started working. The camera angle wasn't great, but she could see him adjusting things, connecting wires, checking gauges on some kind of handheld device. This wasn't casual maintenance. This was engineering. She fast-forwarded through 3 weeks of footage, same pattern every night. Marcus stayed late, worked on his car for 2 or 3 hours, then drove home. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. He was just the janitor. Then she found it. In one clip from 11 days ago, Marcus disconnected something from the engine. A fuel line, maybe. Victoria couldn't tell for certain. but she could see him step back and start the car. The engine ran, with no fuel line connected. The engine ran for 10 minutes before Marcus shut it down, reconnected the line, and drove away. Victoria paused the video. Her hands were shaking. An engine that runs without fuel. An engine that recycles its own energy. An engine that sounds like nothing else on Earth. "My God," she whispered. "What did you build?" The next morning, Victoria called Marcus into her office. He came in still wearing his gray coveralls, his hands rough and calloused from years of work. He stood near the door like he was ready to flee at any moment. "Sit down," Victoria said. Marcus didn't move. "Please." Slowly, he lowered himself into a chair. Victoria studied him for a long moment. He looked tired, worn, like a man who had been running from something for a very long time. "I did some research on you," she said. "MIT, Stanford, NASA. You were a propulsion engineer. A good one from what I can tell." Marcus's expression didn't change. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long. 15 years isn't ancient history, Marcus. You could have worked anywhere. SpaceX would have hired you in a heartbeat. Boeing, Lockheed. Hell, you could have started your own company. Why are you here pushing a mop around my building?" "I needed a job." "Bullshit." Victoria leaned forward. "You're hiding something. That car of yours, that engine, I've heard a lot of engines in my life. I've never heard anything like that." For the first time, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Caution, maybe fear. "It's just an old car," he said. "Then you won't mind selling it to me." Silence. "I'll give you $50,000, Victoria continued. "Cash, today. More than that car is worth by any measure." "It's not for sale." "100,000. "No." "200,000. Marcus stood up. "I should get back to work." $500,000. Victoria's voice rose. $500,000 for a rusted piece of junk with a weird engine. Nobody says no to that. Nobody. Marcus turned to face her. For a moment, the exhaustion in his eyes was replaced by something else. Something hard. Something angry. "You really don't understand, do you?" he said quietly. "You see that car, and you think money. You think opportunity. You think asset. But that's not what it is. That car is all I have left of my wife. Every time I turn that key, I hear her voice. Every mile I drive, I feel her beside me. You can't buy that. Not for $500,000, not for $500 million. Victoria felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she didn't recognize. Maybe guilt, maybe shame. She pushed it down. "Everyone has a price, Marcus." "No." He shook his head slowly. "Everyone doesn't. Some things are sacred. Some things matter more than money. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've never lost anything that couldn't be replaced." He walked to the door, then stopped. "I know who your father was," he said without turning around. "I know what he did, what he built, and I know what he destroyed to build it." Victoria's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" But Marcus was already gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Victoria spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but her mind kept returning to Marcus's words. "I know what your father destroyed." Her father, William Hayes, had died 7 years ago. He'd built this company from nothing, turned it into an aerospace empire, left Victoria a fortune and a legacy she was still trying to live up to. But he'd never talked about his early years. Never explained where the initial capital came from, how he'd acquired the patents that launched the company who he'd worked with before he became William Hayes' CEO. "There are things you don't need to know," he'd told her once when she asked about the company's origins. "Things that don't matter anymore." But they did matter. Victoria could feel it now like a splinter working its way toward the surface of her skin. What did her father destroy? And why did Marcus Chen, a janitor with a NASA background and an impossible engine, seem to know the answer? 3 days later, Victoria made her decision. She called Brad into her office at 7 a.m. Fire him. Brad blinked. Fire who? Marcus Chen, the janitor. I want him gone by noon. What? Why, he hasn't done anything wrong. I don't need a reason. Victoria's voice was flat, cold. I'm the CEO. I can fire anyone I want. Security will escort him out. Make sure he doesn't take anything from the building. Brad stared at her for a long moment. Victoria, what's going on? What happened? Nothing happened. I just don't want him here anymore. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Brad had worked for Victoria long enough to recognize when argument was useless. Fine, he said quietly. I'll handle it. At 11:47 a.m., Marcus Chen was escorted out of Hayes Aerospace Technologies by 2 security guards. Victoria watched from her office window as he crossed the parking lot toward his Mustang. He didn't look back at the building, didn't make a scene, just opened the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. That sound again. That impossible, beautiful sound. Then he drove away, and Victoria was left alone with the silence and the questions she couldn't answer. She thought she'd won. She thought getting rid of him would make the problem disappear. She had no idea that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. 6 days after Marcus Chen was fired, Victoria's phone rang at 3 a.m. It was her head of engineering, Dr. Patricia Reeves. Turn on the news, Patricia said. Her voice was strange, tight. Channel 4. Right now. Victoria fumbled for the remote. The screen flickered to life, showing a press conference in progress. A small podium, simple backdrop, modest production values. At the center stood a man Victoria recognized instantly. Marcus Chen. He looked different, clean-shaven, wearing a simple suit. His eyes were clear and focused, the exhaustion replaced by something else. Purpose. Pleased to announce that Aurora Dynamics has received federal funding of $22 million for the development of our clean energy propulsion system, Marcus was saying. This technology, which my late wife Elena and I developed together over 15 years ago, has the potential to revolutionize not just aerospace, but transportation as a whole. Victoria couldn't breathe. The Aurora engine, Marcus continued, is a self-sustaining power system that recycles its own energy output. In laboratory conditions, our prototype has run continuously for 72 hours without any external fuel source. We believe this technology can reduce carbon emissions in aviation by up to 90%, while simultaneously increasing efficiency and reducing operating costs. Reporters started shouting questions. Mr. Chen, is it true that this technology was stolen from you 15 years ago? Marcus paused. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. There will be a time to discuss the history of this technology, he said carefully. For now, I want to focus on the future, on what the Aurora engine can do for the world. My wife believed this technology could help people. That's what matters. That's what I'm here to honor. Victoria muted the television. Her hands were shaking. $22 million in federal funding. A technology that could make her entire company obsolete. And Marcus Chen, the janitor she'd mocked, humiliated, and fired, was now the face of the future. But it was something else that made her blood run cold. That reporter's question. Is it true that this technology was stolen from you? Victoria picked up the phone and dialed her father's oldest friend, Richard Morrison. The man who had been there at the beginning, who had helped William Hayes build this empire from the ground up. Richard answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. Victoria, do you know what time it is? Tell me about Marcus Chen. Silence. Richard, tell me about Marcus Chen. More silence. Then a long, heavy sigh. How much do you know? I know he worked at NASA. I know he had a wife who died. I know he had a technology that someone stole from him 15 years ago. Victoria's voice was shaking. What I need to know is whether that someone was my father. Silence that stretched into eternity. Then, I think you'd better come to my house. There are some files your father left with me. Files he never wanted you to see. Victoria was in her car before Richard finished speaking. Richard Morrison lived in a mansion in Atherton, 20 minutes from Stanford. He'd known Victoria since she was a child, had bounced her on his knee, had given the eulogy at her father's funeral. Now he stood at his front door at 4 a.m., an old man in a bathrobe holding a manila folder that seemed to weigh more than the world. "Your father was a complicated man," Richard said as he led her into his study. "Brilliant, ruthless, capable of great kindness and great cruelty sometimes in the same breath." "Did he steal the Aurora engine?" Richard sat down heavily in a leather chair. "Steal is a strong word." He handed her the folder. "But yes, in essence, yes." Victoria opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal papers, patent applications, and a handwritten letter in her father's unmistakable script. She started reading. 15 minutes later, she looked up. Her face was pale. Her hands were trembling. "He destroyed them," she whispered. "Marcus and his wife. They came to my father for funding for partnership, and he took everything. He buried the patents. He threatened to bankrupt them with lawsuits if they tried to fight back. He saw an opportunity," Richard said quietly. "A young couple with no money, no connections, no way to defend themselves, and technology that could be worth billions. Your father was many things, Victoria, but sentimental wasn't one of them." Victoria stared at the letter in her hands. The handwriting was clear, precise, businesslike. "Acquired Chen thermal regeneration patents. Legal team estimates settlement cost at $2.3 million to suppress all claims, worth billions in long-term applications. Chen will never recover financially or professionally. Project Aurora terminated. Technology secured. Her father's words, her father's sin, and now his daughter's inheritance." "I mocked him," Victoria said, her voice barely audible. "I humiliated him in front of the whole company. I fired him. And the whole time he knew. He knew what my father did, and he never said a word." Richard reached out and took her hand. "The question now," he said gently, "is, what are you going to do about it?" Victoria looked at the folder, at the evidence of her family's betrayal, at the truth she could no longer escape. And for the first time in her life, she had no idea what to do. Victoria didn't go home that night. She sat in Richard Morrison's study until dawn broke through the windows, reading every document in that folder over and over again. The legal filings, the patent applications, the internal memos, her father's handwritten notes, cold and calculating, describing how he'd systematically dismantled two people's lives to build his empire. "You should get some sleep," Richard said, around 6 a.m., setting a cup of coffee beside her. Victoria didn't look up. "How did you live with this? All these years knowing what he did?" Richard sighed and lowered himself into the chair across from her. "Your father was my best friend for 40 years. I loved him like a brother. But I never said I was proud of everything he did. You could have told me. And what would that have changed? The patents were filed. The company was built. Marcus Chen had already disappeared. Your father convinced himself it was just business, survival of the fittest. The strong take from the weak." Richard shook his head slowly. "I disagreed, but I didn't stop him. That's my sin to carry." Victoria finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "The technology in those patents, the Aurora engine, it's real. I've seen it. I've heard it. Marcus has been driving it around for 15 years in that old Mustang. I know. It could change everything. Aviation, transportation, energy. It could be worth billions," Richard finished. "Yes. Your father knew that too. Why do you think he was so ruthless about acquiring it?" Victoria stood up abruptly, pacing the study like a caged animal. "But he never used it. The patents have been sitting in our archives for 15 years. We never developed the technology. We never even tried." "Your father couldn't make it work." Richard's voice was quiet. He had his engineers study the patents for years. They built prototype after prototype. Nothing performed like the original. The blueprints were incomplete. Marcus and Elena had kept the critical components in their heads, not on paper. Without their cooperation, the technology was useless. So he stole something he couldn't even use. He stole it so no one else could use it. That was enough for him. Victoria stopped pacing. She stared at Richard with something new in her eyes, something that looked almost like hope. But Marcus still has the original, the working prototype. It's been in his car this whole time. Victoria. I need that engine, Richard, not just for the company, for everything. Do you understand what this technology could mean? Clean energy for the entire aviation industry. Reduced emissions. Sustainable transportation. This isn't just about money anymore. Richard studied her face for a long moment. Is that really why you want it? Or is it because you can't stand the thought that a janitor has something you don't? The question hit Victoria like a slap. She wanted to deny it, wanted to claim noble intentions, humanitarian goals, visionary leadership. But something in Richard's eyes made lying impossible. I don't know, she admitted finally. I don't know what I want anymore. I just know I can't let this go. Richard nodded slowly. Then I suppose you'd better figure out who you really are before you do something you can't take back. Victoria grabbed the folder and headed for the door. Keep this conversation between us. Victoria. Richard's voice stopped her. Your father spent his whole life taking things from people who couldn't fight back. He died rich and powerful and completely alone. Is that really the legacy you want to continue? Victoria didn't answer. She walked out into the morning sun, got in her car, and drove away. But Richard's question followed her, echoing in her mind, like a ghost she couldn't exorcise. 3 days later, Victoria called an emergency meeting of her senior engineering team. Dr. Patricia Reeves arrived first, followed by the heads of propulsion materials science and advanced systems. They filed into the conference room looking confused and slightly nervous. Emergency meetings with Victoria Hayes usually meant someone was about to be fired. Close the door, Victoria said. What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room. Anyone who violates that confidentiality will be terminated immediately and sued into oblivion. Understood? Nervous nods around the table. Victoria pulled up the security footage on the wall screen. The same clips she'd watched a dozen times. Marcus Chen working on his car. The engine running without fuel. That impossible, beautiful sound. This is Marcus Chen, she said. Until recently, he worked here as a janitor. Before that, he was a propulsion engineer at NASA, and that engine you're looking at is called the Aurora, a self-sustaining regenerative power system that recycles its own energy output. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the screen. That's not possible. The laws of thermodynamics. I know what the laws say. I also know what I'm seeing. That engine runs without external fuel. I've watched it happen. There must be a hidden power source, said David Kim, head of propulsion. A battery, maybe. Something we're not seeing in the footage. Maybe, but I don't think so. Victoria paused the video on a frame showing the engine compartment. I want you to study these images. Every angle, every frame. I want you to figure out what he built and how he built it. Then I want you to replicate it. Silence around the table. You want us to reverse engineer his technology? Dr. Reeves asked slowly. From security camera footage. Yes. Victoria, that's... Even if we could figure out the basic design, there's no way we could replicate the materials, the tolerances, the specific configurations. Engineering doesn't work like that. You can't just look at a picture of something and build it. Then find another way. Hire consultants. Access our patent archives. Do whatever you have to do. I want a working prototype in 30 days. David Kim shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What patent archives? We don't have anything on regenerative energy systems. Yes, we do. Victoria's voice was flat. My father acquired patents in this area 15 years ago. They're buried somewhere in our IP holdings. Find them. Use them. I don't care what it takes." The engineers exchanged glances. Something was wrong here. They could all feel it, but none of them had the courage to ask questions. 30 days, Victoria repeated. Get it done. The team worked around the clock. Dr. Reeves pulled the buried patents from the archives and spent 3 days just trying to understand the basic principles. The documents were incomplete, deliberately vague in crucial areas, but they provided enough foundation to begin experimentation. David Kim's propulsion team built their first prototype in week 2. It failed immediately. The energy loop collapsed within seconds, the system overheating and shutting down. They rebuilt it. Failed again. Rebuilt. Failed. By week 3, they'd gone through 11 prototypes. Each one got a little closer. Each one ultimately fell apart. The problem is the regenerative cycle, Dr. Reeves explained during a late-night meeting with Victoria. In theory, the engine captures waste energy and feeds it back into the system, creating a near-perpetual loop. But in practice, there's always loss. Heat dissipation, friction, electromagnetic interference. The system degrades faster than it can regenerate. Chen figured it out, Victoria said. His engine runs for hours without degrading. I know, and I can't explain it. Dr. Reeves rubbed her eyes, exhausted. There's something in his design we're not seeing. Some component or material or configuration that the patents don't describe. Without that missing piece, we're just guessing. Then guess better. Victoria, I've been an engineer for 25 years. I've worked on projects for NASA, Boeing, 3 different governments. I'm telling you, this technology is at least 30 years ahead of anything we understand. Whoever built that engine wasn't just smart. They were operating on a level we can't even comprehend. Victoria stared at the latest failed prototype, smoking slightly on the test bench. There has to be a way. There is. Dr. Reeves hesitated. We could ask him. No. Victoria. I said no, find another way. But there was no other way. Victoria knew it. Dr. Reeves knew it. Everyone on the team knew it. The only person who could make this technology work was Marcus Chen. And Marcus Chen was the one person on Earth who would never help Victoria Hayes. 2 weeks after the engineering effort began, the news broke. Angela Torres, an investigative journalist with the San Francisco Chronicle, published a front-page exposé with the headline, "Aerospace Giant Built on Stolen Dreams." Victoria read the article on her phone at 5 a.m., her coffee growing cold in her hand. The story was thorough, devastating. Torres had interviewed former employees from Hayes Aerospace's early days. She'd obtained internal documents through Freedom of Information requests. She'd tracked down Marcus Chen and gotten his first public statement in 15 years. My wife and I spent 7 years developing the Aurora engine. Marcus was quoted saying, "We believed it could help solve the climate crisis. We approached William Hayes for funding and partnership. Instead, he stole our patents, destroyed our careers, and left us with nothing. Elena died believing her life's work had been buried forever. I'm here to prove she was wrong." The article went on to detail the legal maneuvers William Hayes had used to acquire the patents, the threats, the intimidation, the systematic destruction of Marcus and Elena Chen's professional reputations. And then, in the final paragraphs, Torres dropped the bombshell. Sources within Hayes Aerospace confirmed that the company has recently launched a secret effort to replicate Chen's technology using the stolen patents. CEO Victoria Hayes, daughter of the late William Hayes, has reportedly ordered her engineering team to build a working prototype within 30 days, apparently hoping to beat Chen to market with his own invention. Victoria's phone started ringing. Board members, investors, PR consultants. The calls came faster than she could ignore them. By 9 a.m., Hayes Aerospace stock had dropped 18%. By noon, 3 major investors had requested emergency meetings. By 5 p.m., Victoria's own board of directors had called for her resignation. She sat in her office as the sun set over San Francisco, watching her empire crumble in real time. Every news channel was running the story. Social media was exploding with outrage. Justice. For Marcus was trending worldwide, and the worst part, the part that made Victoria want to scream, was that she deserved it. Every word in that article was true. Her father had stolen the technology. She had tried to steal it again. She was exactly what the world was calling her, a privileged heir who thought rules didn't apply to her. Brad knocked on her door around 7 p.m. "The board wants an answer by morning," he said quietly. "They're prepared to vote you out if you don't resign voluntarily." Victoria didn't turn from the window. "What would you do if you were me?" "Honestly, I'd resign. Take a severance package. Disappear for a year or two until this blows over. You're young enough to reinvent yourself." "Run away, you mean?" "Strategic retreat. There's a difference." Victoria finally turned to face him. Her eyes were dry, but something in them had changed. Some hardness had cracked. "My father ran away from what he did. He buried it and pretended it never happened. And look where that got us. Look where it got me." "Victoria, you can't fix this. The damage is done. Chen has federal funding, public sympathy, and a working technology. You have a failed replication effort and a PR nightmare. There's no path forward here. Maybe not for the company." Victoria's voice was quiet. "But maybe there's a path forward for me." Brad stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about doing something my father never did. Something I've never done." She walked to her desk and picked up her keys. "I'm talking about telling the truth." "Victoria, wait. Think about this." But she was already walking out the door, leaving Brad standing alone in her office, wondering if his boss had finally lost her mind. Victoria drove for 45 minutes before she found the address. Aurora Dynamics operated out of a converted warehouse in Oakland, a modest building with simple signage and a small parking lot. Through the windows, she could see lights burning despite the late hour. Engineers working, machines humming, progress being made. She parked her Mercedes beside the rusted Mustang and sat for a long moment gathering her courage. Then she got out and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. She stepped inside and found herself in a workshop filled with engine parts, diagnostic equipment, and the organized chaos of serious innovation. A dozen engineers looked up from their work, surprised to see a stranger. And at the center of it all stood Marcus Chen, his hands covered in grease, his eyes fixed on Victoria with an expression she couldn't read. "Everyone out," Marcus said quietly. His engineers hesitated. "Now." They filed past Victoria without a word, glancing back over their shoulders as they went. In 30 seconds, the workshop was empty except for the two of them. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. "How did you find this place?" "It's listed in the federal grant documentation, public record." "And you came here because—" Victoria took a breath. "I came to apologize." Silence. "I read my father's files," she continued. "I know what he did to you, to your wife. I know how he stole your work and destroyed your careers. I know he threatened you with lawsuits you couldn't afford to fight. I know he took everything." Marcus's expression didn't change. And I'm sorry. Not just for what he did. For what I did. I mocked you in front of the whole company. I tried to buy your car like it was just property. I fired you when you wouldn't give me what I wanted. And then I tried to steal your technology again, just like he did. Is this supposed to make me feel better? No. Victoria's voice cracked. This is supposed to be the truth. Something my family hasn't been very good at telling. Marcus set down the rag and leaned against a workbench. For a long moment he just studied her, his dark eyes searching for something. "Your father came to me once," he said finally, "about a year after he took the patents. Elena was already sick by then. We were drowning in medical bills, couldn't afford lawyers, couldn't afford to fight. and he showed up at our apartment in a $3,000 suit offering to make things right. Victoria felt sick. What did he offer? $200,000. Hush money. Sign a confidentiality agreement, walk away, never speak of the Aurora engine again. Marcus's jaw tightened. Elena was dying. We needed that money. We could have used it for treatment, for comfort, for more time together. And you know what she said? What? She said, "Some things are worth more than money. Some things are worth more than survival. If we take his offer, we'll be dead inside long before the cancer finishes me off." Marcus's voice broke slightly on the last words. She died 3 months later. Never saw a dime of that money. Never saw her work validated. But she died with her integrity intact. Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now. She didn't bother to wipe them away. "I can't give back what my father took," she whispered. "I can't bring Elena back. I can't undo 15 years of pain and injustice. But I can stop being the person I've been. I can stop being him." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "I don't know yet. I just know I had to start here, with you, with the truth." Marcus was quiet for a long time. The workshop hummed around them, machines idling, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "You know what I remember most about Elena?" he said finally. "She believed in second chances, not because people deserve them most of the time they don't, but because she believed that people can change. That the worst version of ourselves doesn't have to be the final version." He walked to a shelf and pulled down a thick binder, its pages yellowed with age. He held it for a moment, weighing it in his hands, making a decision. Then, he held it out to Victoria. "These are the original Aurora engine specifications. Handwritten by me and Elena. Everything your father couldn't steal because we kept it in our heads." Victoria stared at the binder like it was radioactive. "Why would you give this to me?" "I'm not giving it to you, I'm testing you." Marcus's eyes were hard. "Take this home, study it. If you can understand what Elena and I built, not just the mechanics but the philosophy, the reasoning, the heart of it, then maybe you're capable of being someone different than your father. And if I can't, then you'll prove that you're exactly who I think you are. And this conversation will be the last we ever have." Victoria reached out slowly and took the binder. It was heavier than she expected. "How long do I have?" "As long as it takes." Marcus turned back to his work. "Close the door on your way out." Victoria walked out into the Oakland night, clutching the binder to her chest. Behind her, the lights of Aurora Dynamics glowed warm against the darkness. In her hands, she held the key to redemption. She just didn't know yet if she was strong enough to turn it. Victoria didn't go back to her penthouse that night. She couldn't face the empty rooms, the expensive furniture, the view of a city that suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger. Instead, she drove to a 24-hour diner off Highway 101, ordered coffee she didn't drink, and opened the binder. The first page hit her like a punch to the chest. In elegant handwriting, a woman's handwriting, she realized Elena's handwriting were the words, "For Marcus, for our future, for everyone who needs light in the darkness." Victoria stared at that dedication for a long time. This wasn't just engineering. This was love. This was hope. This was everything her father had tried to destroy and failed. She turned the page and started reading. The mathematics were brutal. Victoria had studied engineering in college, had sat through countless technical presentations, had enough background to understand most of what crossed her desk. But this was different. This was genius on a level she'd never encountered. Every equation built on the one before it. Every diagram contained layers of meaning. Elena and Marcus hadn't just designed an engine, they'd created a philosophy of energy, a new way of thinking about power and motion and sustainability. By 3 a.m., Victoria's head was pounding. She'd filled half a legal pad with notes, most of them questions she couldn't answer. The waitress had refilled her coffee 4 times and was starting to give her concerned looks. Victoria didn't care. She kept reading. Around 5 a.m., she found the section labeled Core Principles in Marcus's handwriting. The Aurora engine is not about creating energy from nothing. That's impossible. It's about respecting the energy that already exists, capturing what would otherwise be lost, treating waste as opportunity. Elena always said that the universe doesn't have a scarcity problem. It has a wisdom problem. We throw away more than we use. The Aurora changes that. Victoria read those words 3 times, respecting the energy that already exists. She thought about her own life. The energy she'd wasted on appearances, on competition, on proving herself to people who didn't matter. The opportunities she'd thrown away because they didn't fit her image of success. The relationships she'd burned because maintaining them required effort she wasn't willing to give. She'd been living her whole life like a wasteful engine, losing more than she used. The sun was rising by the time she left the diner. She drove to a storage facility in Menlo Park, rented the largest unit available, and started making calls. "I need equipment," she told Dr. Reeves. "Machine tools, diagnostic systems, everything we used for the prototype attempts." "Victoria, the board is meeting in 3 hours. They're going to vote you out." "I know. I'm not going to the meeting." "What? You have to be there. You have to defend yourself." "No, I don't." Victoria's voice was calm. "Certain. I'm done defending who I was. I'm going to become someone worth defending. Send me the equipment, Patricia. I'll pay for it myself." She hung up before Dr. Reeves could argue. Over the next 6 hours, Victoria transformed the storage unit into a workshop. She maxed out 3 credit cards buying parts and materials. She downloaded software, watched tutorial videos, read technical manuals until her eyes burned. At 2 p.m., her phone buzzed with a news alert. Hayes Aerospace Board removes CEO Victoria Hayes in unanimous vote. She read the headline, set down her phone, and got back to work. The first prototype took her 8 days to build. It was ugly, clumsy. The welds were uneven, the connections imprecise. Her hands, soft from years of signing documents and shaking hands at cocktail parties, were blistered and cut. She'd burned herself twice with the soldering iron, hit her thumb with a hammer hard enough to turn the nail black, and spent one entire night crying in frustration when a circuit board she'd spent 12 hours assembling turned out to be wired backward. But she kept going. She slept on an air mattress in the corner of the storage unit. She ate takeout from the Chinese place down the street sometimes, forgetting to eat at all until hunger made her hands shake. She showered at a truck stop 3 blocks away. She talked to no one except the delivery drivers who brought her supplies. On day 8, she connected the power cell and turned on her prototype. It ran for 4 seconds before the energy loop collapsed and the whole system overheated. Victoria sat on the concrete floor staring at the smoking wreckage of her work and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not frustration, determination. She went back to the binder. Read the section on energy loop stabilization 3 more times. Found a notation in Elena's handwriting that she'd missed before. The key is patience. The system needs time to find its rhythm. Don't force it, guide it. Don't force it, guide it. Victoria thought about how she'd lived her whole life. Forcing, demanding, taking. Never guiding, never waiting, never trusting anything to develop naturally. She rebuilt the prototype, took her time, paid attention to the rhythm Elena described. When she connected the power cell again, she didn't slam the switch. She eased it gently, like coaxing a frightened animal. The engine ran for 30 seconds, then 45, then a minute and 12 seconds before it failed. Progress. 3 weeks into her exile, Richard Morrison found her. He stood in the doorway of the storage unit, staring at the chaos inside the scattered tools. The failed prototypes, the sleeping bag in the corner. The woman who used to run a $4 billion company, now wearing stained coveralls and a ponytail held together with a rubber band. "My God," Richard whispered. "What have you done to yourself?" Victoria didn't look up from the circuit board she was soldering. "I'm learning." "Learning what?" "How to destroy your life." "Victoria, the board has frozen your assets pending an investigation. Your accounts are locked. You're living in a storage unit like a homeless person." "I'm not homeless. I'm working." Richard walked closer, stepping carefully around the debris on the floor. He picked up the binder from Marcus Chen, flipped through a few pages, and set it down again. "He gave you this? He's testing me. If I can build the engine, he'll know I'm serious about changing. And if you can't—" Victoria finally looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot, exhausted, but there was something in them that Richard had never seen before. Something that looked almost like peace. "Then I'll keep trying until I can." Richard pulled up a folding chair and sat down heavily. "The board is talking about criminal charges. They're saying you orchestrated the cover-up of your father's theft, that you knew about the stolen patents for years." "That's a lie. I didn't know until last month." "I know that. But they need someone to blame, and you're the convenient target. Your father's dead. You're not." Victoria turned back to her work. "Let them charge me. I don't care anymore." "You should care. You're looking at potential prison time, securities fraud, intellectual property theft, conspiracy." "Richard?" Victoria's voice was quiet but firm. "I spent my whole life caring about the wrong things. Stock prices, board meetings, what people thought of me, what my father thought of me. And where did it get me? I was the CEO of a company built on stolen dreams, and I didn't even know it. I was so busy protecting my image that I never bothered to look at what was underneath." She held up the circuit board, examining it in the light. "This is real," she said. "This work, this challenge. For the first time in my life, I'm trying to build something instead of take something. And even if I fail, even if I go to prison, even if I lose everything, at least, I'll know I tried to be different than him." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "Your father would have called you a fool," he said finally. "I know. He would have said you're throwing away everything he built. He built it on lies. It was never worth keeping." Richard stood up slowly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Before I came here, I liquidated some of my own holdings. Cash. Untraceable. It's not much, about $80,000, but it should keep you going for a while." Victoria stared at the envelope. "Why would you do that?" "Because I failed your father once. I watched him do terrible things and said nothing. I won't make the same mistake with you." Richard pressed the envelope into her hands. "Be better than him, Victoria. That's all I ask." He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I think Elena Chen would have liked you. The person you're becoming, I mean, not the person you were." Then he was gone, leaving Victoria alone with her work and her binder and the ghost of a woman she'd never met. The breakthrough came on day 37. Victoria had rebuilt the prototype 9 times. Each version got a little better, ran a little longer. She'd learned to read Elena's handwriting like a second language, to anticipate Marcus's logic, to understand the philosophy behind every design choice. And finally, something clicked. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No lightning bolt of inspiration. No sudden revelation. Just a quiet understanding that had been building for weeks, pieces falling into place one by one until the whole picture became clear. The Aurora engine wasn't just about energy recapture. It was about harmony. Every component had to work with every other component, not against it. The system couldn't be forced or dominated. It had to be balanced, guided, respected. Just like Elena had written. Victoria made one final adjustment. A small change to the energy flow regulator, something she'd overlooked a dozen times before. She connected the power cell, held her breath, and turned the key. The engine started. Smooth, quiet, perfect. Victoria watched the diagnostic readouts, waiting for the collapse, waiting for the overheat warning, waiting for failure. 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. The energy loop held. The system recycled its own output, feeding back into itself, sustaining motion without external fuel. It wasn't perpetual. Nothing was perpetual, but it was close. closer than anything she'd ever seen. Victoria sat down on the concrete floor and cried. Not from exhaustion, though she was exhausted. Not from relief, though she was relieved. She cried because for the first time in her life, she had built something real, something true, something that mattered. And she cried because she understood now what Marcus had lost. The woman who had written those notes, who had dreamed these dreams, who had poured her heart into this impossible vision, she was gone. And all the money and power in the world couldn't bring her back. Victoria cried for Elena Chen, a woman she'd never known and could never thank. And somewhere in those tears, she found the person she wanted to become. She called Marcus the next morning. "It works," she said. "The engine, I built it. It's been running for 14 hours. Silence on the other end. "Did you hear me?" I said. "I heard you." Marcus's voice was strange, guarded but something else too, something that might have been surprise. "You actually did it. I want to show you. I want you to see that I understand what you and Elena created. Not just the mechanics, the meaning, the philosophy. I want you to know that I get it now." "Why does that matter to you?" Victoria gripped the phone tighter. "Because I need you to see that I'm not my father. I need someone, anyone, to believe that people can change, that I can change." More silence. Then, "Where are you?" She gave him the address. "I'll be there in 2 hours," he said. "Don't touch anything." Marcus arrived at exactly the time he said he would. He walked into the storage unit without speaking, his eyes moving across the chaos, the failed prototypes in the corner, the tools scattered across workbenches, the binder lying open to a page covered in Victoria's handwritten notes. Then he saw the engine. It was still running, that smooth, quiet hum filling the space like music. The diagnostic screens showed stable readings. The energy loop was holding perfectly. Marcus walked closer. He examined every connection, every circuit, every component. He checked the readings, ran his own diagnostics, monitored the system for any sign of degradation. 15 minutes passed in silence. Finally, he turned to face Victoria. "How long did this take you?" 37 days. "And you built it alone? No help from anyone?" "No help. Just the binder. And a lot of trial and error." Marcus looked back at the engine. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were trembling slightly. "This configuration," he said quietly. "The adjustment you made to the flow regulator. It's not in the binder." Victoria nodded. "I know. I figured it out on my own. It's based on something Elena wrote in the margins about harmony, about every component working with every other component. I realized the original design had a small imbalance in the feedback loop. The change corrects it." Marcus stared at her. "You improved it," he said. "You actually improved our design." "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to make it work." "No." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Elena and I spent 7 years on this engine. We never solved that imbalance. We knew it was there, but we couldn't figure out how to fix it. And you found the answer in 37 days. Victoria didn't know what to say. Marcus walked to the binder and picked it up. He flipped through the pages slowly, looking at Victoria's notes, her calculations, her questions and answers written in the margins alongside Elena's original text. "She would have liked this," he said quietly. "Elena, she would have liked seeing her work continue, seeing someone else understand what we were trying to do. I wish I could have met her." "So do I." Marcus set down the binder and turned to face Victoria fully. "You know what she told me once right before she died? She said that the Aurora engine wasn't just about energy. It was about faith. Faith that the universe gives us what we need if we're wise enough to accept it. Faith that waste can become wealth and loss can become gain." He paused. "She said that someday the right person would find our work and carry it forward. Someone who understood that technology isn't about power, it's about service, about helping people." Victoria felt tears burning in her eyes again. "I'm not sure I'm that person." No, you're not. Not yet. Marcus's voice was gentle now, almost kind. But you might be becoming her. And that's more than I ever expected. He reached out his hand. Victoria stared at it for a moment, not understanding. I need a partner, Marcus said. Aurora Dynamics is growing faster than I can handle alone. The federal grant is just the beginning. We've got interest from airlines, from governments, from companies all over the world. I need someone who understands the technology, who believes in the mission, and who has the skills to navigate the business side of things. You want me to work with you. I want to give you a chance to prove who you are, not your father's daughter, not the CEO who fired me, but the woman who spent 37 days in a storage unit destroying her hands and her reputation and her pride just to understand what two people built out of love. Victoria looked at his hand, rough, calloused, the hand of a man who had lost everything and refused to give up. She thought about her own hands, blistered now, scarred, transformed. She took his hand and shook it. I'll work harder than anyone you've ever met, she said. I'll do whatever it takes to earn this. I know you will. Marcus released her hand and walked toward the door. Shut down the engine and pack your things. You start tomorrow. Marcus, Victoria's voice stopped him. Thank you for giving me the chance, for believing I could change. He turned back to look at her. For the first time since she'd met him, something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Don't thank me yet. The hard part is just beginning. Then he walked out into the morning sun, leaving Victoria alone with the engine and the binder and the future she was finally ready to build. Victoria showed up at Aurora Dynamics at 6 a.m. the next morning, 3 hours before anyone else arrived. She found the door locked, so she sat on the concrete steps outside and waited. The morning fog hung thick over Oakland, turning the streetlights into pale ghosts. Victoria pulled her jacket tighter and watched her breath form clouds in the cold air. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Her mind kept racing through everything that had happened, the storage unit, the engine, Marcus's hand reaching out to her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elena's handwriting in the binder, those careful notes filled with hope and love and scientific genius. A car pulled into the lot at 6:47. It was the Mustang. Still rusted, still battered, still carrying its impossible secret under the hood. Marcus got out and stopped when he saw her on the steps. You're early. I couldn't sleep. That'll pass. He walked past her and unlocked the door. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be working. The workshop looked different in the early morning light. Quieter, more intimate. Victoria followed Marcus through the main floor, past the workbenches and diagnostic equipment, to a small office in the back corner. This was supposed to be a supply closet, Marcus said, flipping on the light. But we needed the space. You'll share it with our CFO if we ever hire one. Victoria looked around. A metal desk, 2 folding chairs, an ancient computer that probably ran Windows XP. A single window looking out at the parking lot. It was the smallest, most cramped office she'd ever seen. It's perfect, she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You used to have a corner office with a view of the entire Bay Area. I used to be a lot of things. Victoria set her bag on the desk. What do you need me to do? For the next 3 months, Victoria learned what it meant to build something from nothing. She answered phones. She filed paperwork. She negotiated with suppliers who didn't return calls and investors who wanted too much control. She learned to fix the coffee maker when it broke, to unclog the toilet when the plumber was too expensive, to stay late reconciling spreadsheets because they couldn't afford an accountant. The other engineers didn't trust her at first. They'd all heard the stories, the CEO who mocked their boss, the heiress who tried to steal their technology. They watched her with suspicious eyes, waiting for her to fail, waiting for her to reveal that this whole redemption act was just another scheme. Victoria didn't blame them. She just kept working. One night, about 6 weeks in, she was alone in the workshop running diagnostics on a new prototype when Marcus appeared beside her. "It's midnight," he said. "Go home. I want to finish these tests." "The tests can wait. The Boeing meeting is in 3 days. If we don't have solid data—" "Victoria." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "You've been here since 6 a.m. You've been here since 6 a.m. every day for 6 weeks. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" Victoria tried to remember and couldn't. "You're going to burn out," Marcus continued, "and then you'll be useless to everyone, including yourself." "I can't stop," Victoria's voice cracked. "Every time I slow down, I think about everything I did, everything my father did. I think about how many years you lost because of us, how Elena died without ever seeing her work recognized. I can't just go home and watch TV and pretend everything's okay." Marcus pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. "Let me tell you something about Elena," he said quietly. "When she was dying, when we both knew she only had a few weeks left, I wanted to spend every minute at her bedside. I wanted to hold her hand and tell her I loved her and make up for all the time we'd lost fighting for the patents, fighting against your father, fighting to survive." He paused. "You know what she said? She said, 'Marcus, if you sit here watching me die, you'll die too. Not physically, but inside. You'll carry this grief like a weight until it crushes you.' She made me promise to take breaks, to eat meals, to sleep, to live." Victoria felt tears on her cheeks, but didn't wipe them away. "She said that guilt is just another form of selfishness," Marcus continued. "When we punish ourselves, we're making everything about us, our pain, our redemption, our story. But real change isn't about punishment. It's about service. It's about taking the energy we'd waste on guilt and using it to help someone else." "How do you do that?" Victoria whispered. "How do you stop feeling guilty for something that can never be fixed?" "You don't stop feeling it. You just learn to carry it differently. Like the engine. You don't eliminate the waste, you transform it. You turn it into something useful." Victoria looked at the prototype on the bench. The smooth curves of the housing. The precise arrangement of components. Elena's design improved by Victoria's hands. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "Be the person you need me to be, the person Elena would have wanted." "Neither do I." Marcus stood up. "But I'm willing to find out. Are you—" Victoria nodded. "Then go home, get some sleep, and come back tomorrow ready to transform your waste into something useful." The Boeing meeting changed everything. Victoria had spent weeks preparing financial projections, technical specifications, market analyses, risk assessments. She'd rehearsed her presentation until she could deliver it in her sleep. She'd anticipated every possible question, every potential objection. But when the Boeing executives walked into the Aurora Dynamics workshop, they didn't want to see PowerPoint slides. They wanted to see the engine. "We've read your materials," said the lead negotiator, a silver-haired woman named Catherine Wells. "Impressive numbers. But numbers can be manipulated. Show us something real." Marcus looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at the Mustang parked in the corner of the workshop like it always was. "Follow me," she said. She led the Boeing team outside to where the rusted car sat in the morning sun. Catherine Wells wrinkled her nose. "This is your demonstration." "This is the original," Victoria said. "The first Aurora engine ever built. It's been running for 15 years in this car. It's survived cross-country trips, California summers, freezing winters. It's never needed a major repair. It's never needed fuel." "Never needed fuel?" Catherine's voice was skeptical. "That's quite a claim." "Watch." Victoria opened the hood. The Boeing engineers crowded around their skepticism, giving way to curiosity as they examined the engine components. Victoria pointed out the energy recapture systems, the regenerative loops, the harmonized flow regulators. "We'll run a full diagnostic," Marcus said. "Live data feed to your tablets. You'll see exactly what the engine is doing in real time." He connected the monitoring equipment while Victoria climbed into the driver's seat. The leather was cracked and worn, the dashboard faded. It looked like a car that should have been in a junkyard. Victoria turned the key. The engine sang. That perfect, impossible sound filled the parking lot. The Boeing engineers stared at their tablets, watching the data flow across their screens. Energy in, energy recycled, energy out. A loop that sustained itself, that grew stronger over time instead of weaker. "That's not possible," one of the engineers whispered. "And yet, there it is," Victoria replied. The demonstration lasted an hour. Victoria answered every question, explained every component, walked through every technical detail. She didn't oversell or exaggerate. She just told the truth about what Marcus and Elena had built and what it could do. When it was over, Catherine Wells stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the Mustang like she was seeing the future. "I've been in this industry for 32 years, she said finally. "I've seen a lot of people promise miracles. Most of them were lying. A few of them were delusional. But this?" She shook her head slowly. "This is real." "It's real," Victoria confirmed. "And we're ready to scale it." Catherine turned to face her. "I know who you are, Ms. Hayes. I know what your father did. I know what you did. There are people at Boeing who think we shouldn't be anywhere near you or this company." Victoria's stomach tightened. "What do you think?" "I think people can change. I think technology doesn't care about politics or history or family legacies. And I think this engine could transform the entire aviation industry." Catherine extended her hand. "Boeing is prepared to offer an exclusive partnership agreement. $10 billion over 5 years in exchange for first-mover access to the Aurora technology." $10 billion. Victoria felt dizzy. This was more money than she'd ever handled at Hayes Aerospace, more money than her father's entire company had been worth when he died. "We'll need to discuss terms," she managed to say. "Of course, but Victoria..." Catherine's grip was firm. "Don't make us regret this. There won't be a second chance." The partnership announcement made international news. Boeing bets billions on revolutionary clean energy engine. Read the headlines. Former Hayes Aerospace CEO leads sustainability breakthrough. From disgrace to innovation, the Victoria Hayes redemption story. Victoria didn't do interviews. She didn't appear on talk shows, or give TED Talks, or write op-eds about her journey. She just kept working, kept building, kept trying to deserve the chance she'd been given. But not everyone was celebrating. 3 weeks after the Boeing deal, a process server appeared at Aurora Dynamics with a thick envelope. Victoria opened it to find a lawsuit from her former board of directors. They were suing for breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of company resources, and fraud. They were seeking $500 million in damages, and they were demanding that Victoria be barred from working in the aerospace industry for the rest of her life. "They're trying to destroy us," Victoria said, dropping the papers on Marcus's desk. "They know they can't compete with the Aurora technology, so they're going to bury us in legal fees." Marcus picked up the lawsuit and skimmed through it. His expression was calm, almost amused. "This is nothing new," he said. "Your father did the same thing to me and Elena, threatened us with lawsuits we couldn't afford to fight, tried to make us so scared of the process that we'd just give up. And you didn't fight. We couldn't afford to, but you can." Marcus set down the papers and looked at her. "You still have connections, don't you? Lawyers who owe you favors. Journalists who would love to dig deeper into Hayes Aerospace's history. You want me to fight back. I want you to defend what we're building, not for your reputation for the mission, for Elena's dream." Victoria thought about it for a long moment. "If I fight this publicly," she said slowly, "everything comes out. My father's theft, the cover-up, all the dirty details of how Hayes Aerospace really got started. I know. It could destroy what's left of my family's legacy. My mother is still alive. My brother runs a foundation that bears our name. This will hurt them. I know that too. Is that what you want, revenge against the Hayes family?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. Victoria. I spent 15 years thinking about revenge, fantasizing about the day I could expose what your father did and watch his empire crumble. But you know what I learned? Revenge is just another form of waste. It uses up energy that could be spent on something better. Then why are you asking me to fight? I'm not asking you to fight for revenge. I'm asking you to fight for truth. There's a difference. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. Your father built his empire on lies. Hayes Aerospace exists because he stole from people who couldn't defend themselves. Every success, every achievement, every dollar of profit came from that original sin. He turned to face her. You can't undo what he did, but you can stop hiding from it. You can stand up in public and say, this is what happened. This is who my father was. And this is who I choose to be instead. That's not revenge, that's liberation. Victoria picked up the lawsuit again. Page after page of legal threats, accusations, demands for money she didn't have. They'll fight back hard, she said. They'll drag out the trial for years. They'll try to bankrupt us before we can bring the Aurora technology to market. Probably. We could lose everything. We could. Marcus's voice was steady. Or we could win. And if we win, we won't just save Aurora Dynamics. We'll prove that the truth matters more than power, that people can face their worst selves and choose to be better. Victoria looked at him. This man who had lost everything and rebuilt himself from the wreckage, who had every reason to hate her and had chosen to give her a chance instead. Elena would tell you to fight, Marcus said quietly. Not for revenge, for hope. For everyone who's ever been crushed by someone more powerful and never got justice. Victoria folded the lawsuit and put it in her bag. I'll need to make some calls, she said. I know a journalist at the Chronicle who's been investigating Hayes Aerospace for years. And I have a lawyer, an old friend from college, who does pro bono work for whistleblowers. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. Marcus nodded. Whatever you need. Marcus. Victoria paused at the door. Thank you. For believing I could change. For giving me something worth fighting for. Don't thank me yet, he said. The hardest part is still ahead. Victoria's press conference was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. She stood backstage in a modest conference center in downtown San Francisco, wearing a simple black suit, no jewelry, no designer labels, nothing that would remind anyone of the woman she used to be. Her hands were shaking. You don't have to do this, Marcus said, standing beside her. We could settle the lawsuit privately, find another way. No, Victoria shook her head. I spent my whole life hiding from hard truths, running from my father's shadow, pretending I could inherit his success without inheriting his sins. That ends today. Are you scared? Terrified. She laughed a shaky sound. But Elena was right. Guilt is just another form of selfishness. I've been so focused on my own redemption that I forgot about everyone else who was hurt. The investors who trusted Hayes Aerospace. The employees who lost their jobs. Marcus, the man who lost 15 years of his life. If I can't face the truth in public, then everything I've done in the past 6 months is just performance, said. Marcus reached out and squeezed her hand. For what it's worth, I don't think it's performance. I think you've actually changed. How can you tell? Because the Victoria Hayes I met a year ago would never be shaking before a press conference. She was too sure of herself, too armored. The woman standing here right now is vulnerable. Real. He released her hand. Elena always said that vulnerability is the price of transformation. If it doesn't scare you, it isn't real change. The stage manager appeared at Victoria's elbow. Ms. Hayes, they're ready for you. Victoria took a deep breath. Wish me luck. I don't believe in luck, Marcus said. I believe in choices. Go make the right one. The conference room was packed. Journalists, investors, industry analysts, lawyers, everyone who mattered in the aerospace world had come to hear what Victoria Hayes had to say. Cameras lined the back wall. Microphones bristled from the podium. The buzz of conversation fell silent as Victoria walked to the stage. She set her notes on the podium, looked out at the crowd, and pushed the notes aside. I had a speech prepared, she said. 3 pages of carefully worded statements designed to minimize legal liability and protect my reputation. But I've decided to do something different. I've decided to tell you the truth. The room went completely still. 15 years ago, my father, William Hayes, founder of Hayes Aerospace, stole revolutionary technology from 2 young engineers named Marcus and Elena Chen. He used lawyers and threats, and his superior resources to take their patents, destroy their careers, and bury their work. The foundation of Hayes Aerospace, the technology that made us an industry leader, was built on that theft. Gasps, murmurs, the clicking of keyboards as journalists began typing frantically. I didn't know about this until recently, Victoria continued. But ignorance isn't innocence. I benefited from what my father did. I built my career on his stolen success. And when I finally learned the truth, my first instinct was to do what he would have done to steal from Marcus Chen again, to take the Aurora engine technology and claim it for Hayes Aerospace. She paused. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I'm here today to acknowledge that, to apologize for it, and to commit publicly to a different path. Victoria talked for 45 minutes. She laid out the entire history, her father's theft, the buried patents, Marcus and Elena's destroyed careers. She explained how she'd learned the truth, how she'd tried to replicate the technology, how she'd been forced out of her own company when the scandal broke. And then she talked about the storage unit, the 37 days, the blisters on her hands and the ache in her shoulders. The moment the engine finally ran, and she understood what Elena had been trying to teach her. I can't undo what my father did, Victoria said. I can't bring back the years Marcus lost. I can't give Elena the recognition she deserved while she was alive. But I can do something he never did. I can tell the truth. I can use whatever influence I have left to make sure the Aurora technology reaches the people who need it. I can spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the second chance I've been given. She looked directly into the cameras. To everyone who was hurt by my father's actions, I'm sorry. To Marcus Chen, who showed me grace when I deserved condemnation, thank you. And to Elena Chen, who I never had the honor to meet, I promise you that your dream will not be buried again. Your work will change the world, and everyone will know your name. Victoria stepped back from the podium. The room erupted. Questions came from every direction. Some hostile, some sympathetic, all demanding more. Victoria answered them one by one, hiding nothing, deflecting nothing. By the end, she was exhausted, emptied out, but also somehow lighter. She walked off stage to find Marcus waiting in the wings. His eyes were wet. You did it, he said quietly. You actually did it. Is it enough? I don't know. Marcus reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. But it's a start. They walked out of the conference center together into the bright California sun, into a future neither of them could predict. But for the first time since this journey began, Victoria felt like she might actually deserve to see what came next. The aftermath of the press conference hit like a tidal wave. Within 24 hours, Victoria's confession had been viewed over 40 million times online. News networks ran the clip on endless loops. Social media exploded with hashtags. #Justice for Elena Sat Aurora Engine. #Victoria Hayes. Truth. Opinion pieces flooded the internet, some calling her a hero, others insisting this was just another publicity stunt from a disgraced heiress. Victoria ignored all of it. She went back to the workshop and kept working, but the world wouldn't let her disappear. 3 days after the press conference, the Hayes Aerospace Board dropped their lawsuit. No explanation, no public statement, just a quiet withdrawal filed with the court. Victoria found out from her lawyer, who called her at 6 a.m. with the news. They're scared, he said. Your confession opened up too many questions. If this goes to trial, everything comes out under oath. They'd rather cut their losses than risk exposure. What about the criminal investigation? The DA's office is reviewing the case, but honestly, you're not the target anymore. You cooperated. You told the truth. They're looking at the board members who knew about the stolen patents and covered it up for years. Victoria hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long moment. She'd expected to feel relief. Instead, she felt hollow. The lawsuit was gone, but the weight was still there. The knowledge of what her father had done, the years that could never be returned, the damage that could never be fully repaired. Marcus found her in the workshop an hour later, staring at the engine she'd built in the storage unit. "I heard about the lawsuit," he said. "Congratulations." "It doesn't feel like a victory." "It's not supposed to." Marcus pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "Justice isn't about winning. It's about balance. About setting things right. That takes time." "How much time?" "As much as it takes." Victoria turned to look at him. "Do you ever stop feeling it? The anger, the grief, the sense that something was taken from you that can never be replaced?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "But you learn to carry it differently. Some days it's heavy. Some days you barely notice it. And some days, the good days, you realize that everything you lost led you somewhere you needed to be. I don't understand how you can sit here with me, after everything my family did to you, after everything I did." "Because Elena taught me something important." Marcus's voice was soft. "She said that forgiveness isn't about the person who wronged you. It's about yourself. When you hold on to anger, you're the one who suffers. The other person goes on with their life. You're the one stuck in the past, reliving the hurt over and over. So you've forgiven me. I'm working on it." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Ask me again in 10 years. Victoria laughed despite herself. It was a small sound, fragile but real. "Fair enough," she said. The next 6 months were the hardest of Victoria's life. The Boeing partnership moved forward, but scaling the Aurora technology was exponentially more difficult than building a single prototype. Supply chain problems, manufacturing challenges, regulatory hurdles that seemed designed to slow innovation rather than enable it. Victoria threw herself into solving each problem, working 18-hour days, learning skills she'd never needed as a CEO. She negotiated with suppliers who tried to overcharge them. She testified before congressional committees who wanted to understand the technology. She flew to factories in 3 different countries to oversee quality control. And through it all, Marcus was beside her. They developed a rhythm, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Marcus handled the technical side, the engineering, the research, the constant refinement of the Aurora design. Victoria handled the business side, the contracts, the negotiations, the endless meetings with investors and partners and regulators. They argued sometimes. Marcus thought Victoria pushed too hard, moved too fast. Victoria thought Marcus was too cautious, too willing to let perfect be the enemy of good. But they always found their way back to common ground, always remembered what they were fighting for. One night, about 7 months after the press conference, they were working late in the workshop when Victoria's phone rang. It was Catherine Wells from Boeing. "We did it," Catherine said. "The FAA just approved the Aurora engine for commercial aviation use. First flight is scheduled for next month." Victoria dropped the phone. Marcus looked up from his work. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Victoria's voice was shaking. "Everything's right. The FAA approved us. We're going to fly Marcus. We're actually going to fly." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus walked to the old Mustang still parked in the corner of the workshop and put his hand on the hood. "She would have loved this," he said quietly. "Elena. She always dreamed of seeing the Aurora in the sky." Victoria walked over and stood beside him. "Tell me about her. Not the scientist, the woman, the person you loved." Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he started talking. He told Victoria about how they'd met in a graduate seminar at Stanford, both of them too stubborn to admit the other one was right. He told her about their first date, a disaster that ended with a flat tire and a 2-hour walk home. He told her about their wedding, a small ceremony in Golden Gate Park, with exactly 12 guests. He told her about the day Elena got diagnosed. How she'd held his hand and said, "Well, I guess we'd better work faster." How she'd spent her final months in the workshop, pushing through pain and exhaustion, refusing to give up on their dream. She knew she was dying, Marcus said. She knew she'd never see the aurora fly. But she kept working anyway, right up until the end. Her last words to me were about the energy flow regulator. She'd figured out a way to improve it, and she was trying to explain it to me, but she couldn't. His voice broke. Victoria reached out and took his hand. She didn't say anything, she just held on. "I spent 15 years being angry," Marcus continued after a moment. "Angry at your father, angry at the world, angry at God or fate or whatever force decides who lives and who dies. But Elena wouldn't have wanted that. She would have wanted me to keep working, to keep believing, to find someone who could help me finish what we started." He turned to look at Victoria. "She would have liked you," he said. "The person you've become. She would have seen something in you worth saving." "I wish I could have met her." "In a way you did. Every time you read her notes, every time you followed her logic, solved a problem she left behind. She's still here, Victoria, in the work, in the engine, in everyone whose life will be changed by what she built." Victoria squeezed his hand. "Then let's make sure the world knows her name." The first commercial flight using Aurora engine technology took off from San Francisco International Airport on a clear October morning. Victoria and Marcus watched from the observation deck as the Boeing 787 retrofitted with Aurora propulsion systems taxied to the runway. The aircraft was painted with a special livery for the occasion, deep blue with gold accents, and on the tail, a single word, Elena. "You didn't have to do that," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the plane. "Name it after her." "Yes, I did." Victoria's voice was firm. "This is her achievement, her legacy. The world needs to know who made this possible." The engines spooled up that familiar sound, that perfect harmonic that Victoria had first heard in a parking lot, what felt like a lifetime ago. The aircraft began to move faster and faster until it lifted off the ground and climbed into the blue California sky. Marcus watched it go, tears streaming down his face. "She's flying," he whispered. "Elena's finally flying." Victoria put her arm around his shoulders and held him as he cried. Around them, the crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. But Victoria and Marcus stood apart from it all, two people who had traveled a long road to reach this moment. When the plane disappeared into the clouds, Marcus wiped his eyes and turned to face Victoria. "Thank you," he said, "for everything, for changing, for helping me finish what we started. I should be thanking you. You gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. You taught me what it means to build something real. We taught each other." Marcus smiled. "That's what partnership means." The success of the Aurora engine spread like wildfire. Within a year, 15 major airlines had signed licensing agreements. Within 2 years, the technology had been adapted for shipping vessels, trains, and long-haul trucking. Within 3 years, the first Aurora-powered cars rolled off assembly lines, clean and efficient, and affordable enough for ordinary families. Environmental groups called it the most significant breakthrough in clean energy history. Economists estimated that Aurora technology would prevent billions of tons of carbon emissions over the next decade. Scientists studied it as a masterpiece of engineering, a solution so elegant that it seemed almost impossible. And everywhere, Elena Chen's name became synonymous with innovation and hope. Victoria and Marcus were profiled in every major publication. They gave speeches at conferences around the world. They testified before the United Nations about the potential of clean energy technology. They became reluctant celebrities, their partnership held up as an example of what was possible when old enemies chose reconciliation over revenge. But Victoria never forgot where she came from. She established the Elena Chen Foundation, dedicated to supporting young engineers from disadvantaged backgrounds. She funded scholarships, research grants, mentorship programs. She made sure that the next generation of innovators would have opportunities that Elena never had. And every year on the anniversary of Elena's death, Victoria and Marcus would visit her grave together. They'd stand in the quiet cemetery looking at the simple headstone, and Marcus would talk to his wife. He'd tell her about the company's progress, the lives being changed, the dreams coming true. He'd tell her about Victoria, how she'd transformed from enemy to partner, from destroyer to builder. And Victoria would add her own words. "I never knew you," she'd say. "But you saved me. Your work, your vision, your belief that people could be better than they are. You gave me a reason to change, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor that gift." 5 years after the first Aurora flight, Victoria received an unexpected invitation. The National Museum of American Innovation wanted to create a permanent exhibit honoring the Aurora engine. They wanted to display the original prototype, the rusted Mustang that had carried the secret through 15 years of obscurity. Marcus agreed to donate the car, but on one condition: Victoria had to be there for the unveiling. "Why me?" she asked when he told her. "Because you're part of the story now. Elena's story, the Aurora's story. You can't separate yourself from it anymore." "I'm still not sure I belong in the same exhibit as her." "That's exactly why you do." Marcus's voice was gentle. "Redemption doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means integrating it, owning it, using it to teach others what's possible." The unveiling ceremony was held on a crisp November afternoon. The museum had recreated a version of the Aurora Dynamics workshop, complete with workbenches, diagnostic equipment, and at the center of it all, the 1972 Ford Mustang. The rust had been preserved, the faded paint left untouched. It looked exactly as it had on that day in the parking lot when Victoria had first heard the engine sing. A bronze plaque stood beside the car. Victoria read it aloud during her speech. This vehicle carried a revolution. For 15 years, it transported a dream that powerful forces tried to destroy. The Aurora engine, developed by Marcus and Elena Chen, represents one of the most significant technological achievements in human history. But more than that, it represents the power of persistence, the strength of love, and the possibility of redemption. Victoria paused and looked out at the crowd. She saw familiar faces. Richard Morrison, now 92, and still sharp as ever. Patricia Reeves, who had left Hayes Aerospace to join Aurora Dynamics. The Boeing executives who had taken a chance on technology that seemed impossible. And Marcus standing in the front row with tears in his eyes. "I want to tell you a story," Victoria continued. "It's a story about a woman I never met, but who changed my life forever. Her name was Elena Chen, and she believed that technology exists to serve humanity, not to dominate it, not to exploit it, but to lift it up. She believed that the universe doesn't have a scarcity problem. It has a wisdom problem. She believed that waste can become wealth, and loss can become gain." Victoria's voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. "Elena died believing her life's work had been buried. She died thinking that the powerful had won, that innovation could be crushed by greed. But she was wrong. Her work survived, her dream survived, and today millions of people around the world are living better lives because of what she built." Victoria looked at Marcus. "I'm not the hero of this story. I'm not even a supporting character. I'm the villain who learned to be something else. I'm the proof that even the worst version of ourselves doesn't have to be the final version. Elena believed that Marcus told me so. She believed in second chances. She believed in transformation. She believed in the possibility of redemption." Victoria walked to the Mustang and put her hand on the hood. "This car taught me what real value looks like. It's not about shine or status or the size of your office. It's about what you build, what you protect, what you're willing to sacrifice to make things right." She turned back to the crowd. Elena Chen never got to see her engine fly. She never got to see the airlines lining up to license her technology, the carbon emissions dropping, the world beginning to change. But I have to believe that somehow, somewhere she knows. She knows that her dream came true. She knows that her work mattered. And she knows that a woman who was once her enemy has spent 5 years trying to deserve the gift of a second chance. Victoria stepped back from the podium. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions. But Victoria was looking at Marcus. He nodded slowly, and in that nod, she saw everything. Forgiveness, acceptance, partnership, hope. They weren't friends exactly. The wounds were too deep for that. But they were something else, something harder to name. Witnesses to each other's transformation. Proof that broken things could be rebuilt. After the ceremony, when the crowds had dispersed and the museum had grown quiet, Victoria and Marcus stood alone beside the Mustang. "Do you remember the first time you heard this engine?" Marcus asked. "In the parking lot, the day you made everyone stop laughing. What did you feel?" Victoria thought about it for a long moment. "Confusion, curiosity, and something else, something I didn't recognize at the time. I think it was fear." "Fear of what?" "Fear of being wrong. Fear that there were things in the world I didn't understand. Fear that my whole life was built on a lie." She paused. That fear turned out to be a gift. It was the beginning of change. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a key. Old and worn, its metal smooth from years of use. "This is the original key," he said. "The one Elena used to start the engine for the very first time. I've carried it with me every day for 20 years. He held it out to Victoria. "I want you to have it." Victoria stared at the key. "Marcus, I can't." "Yes, you can. Elena would have wanted this. She believed in passing things forward, not holding them back. This key started a revolution. Now it belongs to the woman who helped finish it." Victoria took the key with trembling hands. It was warm from Marcus's pocket, worn smooth by years of hope and grief and persistence. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Remember, every time you doubt yourself, every time you wonder if you've really changed, hold this key and remember what it started. Remember that the most valuable things in life aren't always visible. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look past the rust and see the gold underneath." Victoria closed her fingers around the key. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Thank you," Marcus replied, "for proving that Elena was right, that people can change, that redemption is possible." They stood together in the quiet museum, looking at the car that had carried them both through transformation. The rust was still there. The paint still faded, the passenger door still slightly crooked. But inside that worn exterior was proof of something miraculous. That genius can survive theft. That love can outlast death. That the people who mock old cars and quiet janitors sometimes learn the hardest lesson of all, that worth isn't measured in shine or status, but in what you build, what you protect, and what you're willing to sacrifice to make things right. Victoria held the key tight and made a silent promise. To Elena, whose dream she'd helped fulfill. To Marcus, whose trust she'd earned through years of work. To herself, the woman she'd become after burning down everything she used to be. The museum lights dimmed around them, but the story wasn't ending. It was continuing in every Aurora-powered aircraft crossing the sky, every clean energy vehicle rolling off assembly lines, every young engineer studying Elena's designs and dreaming of what they might build. Some revolutions start with a bang. Others start with a whisper. And some, the ones that matter most, start with a rusted old car in a parking lot, an engine that shouldn't exist, and two people brave enough to believe that even the most broken things can be made to run again. The janitor had his justice. The CEO had her redemption. And the old car that everyone laughed at became the machine that changed the world. Because in the end, every engine, every person, every broken thing has the potential to be reborn. All it takes is someone willing to turn the key.